Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. It's about 9 o'clock, and we have a very, very full agenda today. Excuse me. I know people will continue to come in and out throughout the day, and that will happen. And if I'm facing a little weird, it's because that light is right in our eyes, but we'll manage just fine. So thank you so very much for joining us for today's program management review on the 2020 census. I'm excited to see you guys here, and I know that there are more and more people watching us from the comfort of their office or their home on Ustream. So this is very exciting for us to have that. If you're not aware, I do want to make you aware about that, but we are broadcasting this on our Ustream channel. This is the second time that we'll have been webcasting our PMR, and we're excited about that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I also want to start this morning with a quick apology on my own behalf. For those of you that know me well, you'll probably notice that I'm not here today with my usual enthusiasm. I've been struggling this week, and I've actually been out for most of this week with that cold that's going around. But I am here, and I'm glad to be here. I just don't have that usual energy, so please do bear with me a little bit for that. I am here now, and I hope to stay here through the day, but we'll see how that goes for me today. I'm stealing Chuck's thunder this time, and I'm going to do the quick housekeeping items just to get us going. First of all, the reminder that this is being broadcast internally as well as externally. At our last PMR, which was the first time we did use the webcast, we had over 400 unique views. So we were really excited about that. And why was I so excited about that? That was a fairly last-minute addition for us to be able to webcast it. And so we didn't do a lot of promotion around it, and we still had over 400 views. For this PMR, we were able to get the word out over the last few months about the fact that we were doing it, and the fact that these recordings have been archived or will be archived on our website. So I know a press release went out about the webcast of this PMR. I think a tip sheet went out about it. An email went out to our data dissemination network. Yesterday, when I was doing some work from home, I happened to notice on APDU, the Association of Public Data Users newsletter, they had a promotion piece about the PMR. So I think word is getting out there, so I'm confident that more and more people will be tuning in, and I look forward to seeing what those counts are about it. But I do remind you that it is being webcast, which means that the mics are on. So while you do have mics in front of you and you can turn them on and off and the red light indicates when they're on, in general, the room is mic'd. So just be conscious of that and be aware of that. If you're talking, it could be picked up, and it's something to remember. For those of you that have brought laptops or iPads or some other tech device with you and need some support, we do have guest wireless available for you, and there is tech support to help you connect to that should you need it. And if you do, Chuck, who's sitting over at the table over there, can point you in the right direction to those people that can help, and he's raising his hand for you guys. And they're raising their hand in the back of the room should you need it, even better. If you do have questions, please do remember to speak directly into the microphones and announce who you are before your question. That's both for the purpose of letting people know who you are, but also we are recording it and transcribing these events, so that does help with that as well. I need to tell you that there are restrooms, and they are down to my right, down the hall. I think most of you have been here before, so you know where they are. There's a set right there, right behind us, and another set if you go out into the main corridor to your left or right. And in the case of an emergency, we do have an emergency exit right here. There's another emergency exit just to the right outside the room. And should we be told that we have to shelter in place for some reason, we will exit this room and go down the stairs, which are right out there, which was something I just learned, which is interesting. We'll be taking our lunch break today at around 12, and we may shorten that if we feel like we need to based on the exciting discussions that are occurring. One other thing that I wanted to tell you, kind of goes hand in hand with the Ustream, is we are dipping our toes into the concept of tweeting. So for those of you that do tweet, we will be tweeting during the event. Our hashtag is hashtag 2020 census, so please feel free to use it, and please feel free to join us as we do this. I know that I'll be looking forward to doing a search on that tonight to see what people were saying about today's event. So back to our program. I think that's it for this slide. We do encourage questions. As you know, we look forward to the open dialogue. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to hear from you all about what's going on as much as it is for us to share with you what we're doing. But we do have a very full agenda today, and we're very excited about that. So I just caution you that we may need to take some things offline, not because we want to limit that conversation, but just for the sake of time. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to email us, as always, at the census.2020.programmanagementreview. There's more dots in there, but it's up on the slide, at census.gov, and we look forward to your questions. We'll be happy to respond to any and all of those. And that's the same email that we've been using, so we do have that mail-in database. One last thing before we jump right into today's agenda, I do want to take a moment to thank Kim Higginbotham, who's sitting here, and Chuck Fowler and their staff for all of their effort to put today's event together. We do this every 3 months, and for all of you, it seems to come off like clockwork, but for us, it's quite a bit that they do to get us ready, and I'm extremely appreciative for them, for their efforts. In addition to the work they do, we also should thank our conference and management staff, as well as all of our IT staff and our communication staff that all do their part in helping us prepare for this and get this ready. I truly, truly do appreciate everything that goes into it. It's quite monumental. The last thing is just mark your calendars. Our next PMR is planned for April 8th, and we are actually already working on that agenda. So with April in mind, what is it we're going to be talking about today? Very excited. Today we're going to give you an update on the Decennial Census Directorate's reorganization efforts. I'm going to share with you where we are with that and where we are in terms of our staffing. Then we're going to jump in and review the current state of the 2020 census program. We'll have a quick not so quick. We'll have a demonstration of where we are with our re-engineering our field operations. We'll spend some time talking about the 2014 census test results. We'll discuss our 2015 testing activities, and we'll end the day with what I suspect will be a briefer discussion than what we planned just because of time, but a discussion about our planned 2016 testing activities. And if that does happen to get cut short because of it, you do have the slides, and we'll plan to go into much greater detail at the next PMR on that. It's just a feeling as we've gone through the dry runs that one's going to get cut short. So you may be wondering why I wanted to spend some of the precious time talking with you about our reorganization. There's a lot of reasons for that, and many of you may be familiar with an expression that I use quite a bit, but you may be familiar with it in general, which is, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And it's something that I truly firmly believe. And so the reorganization to me is quite essential, and getting the right people in the right place so that we can execute the program that we are designing to execute is so important. We can have the best planned program in the world, but if we don't have the right people to do it, then it won't come off the way we need it to come off. We need to have the right people in the right place, allow them to do what needs to be done. With that said, completing our directorate's reorganization and getting that full team in place for the 2020 census has been one of my top priorities for the last few months. And I'm extremely pleased to be here today to be able to share our progress, our accomplishments, and roll out our senior management team for the decennial census programs. In front of you is the high-level directorate design, and hand in hand with that, I think, is my first announcement for the day, which is we like to have late-breaking news, which this isn't so late-breaking because I'm sure most of you have already heard it. But earlier this week, I was able to announce that Deirdre Bishop has been selected, and probably most important, has accepted the chief of the Decennial Management Division. I'm extremely pleased about that. I'm extremely, extremely pleased to be able to plan, to think through, to work, and to be able to execute the 2020 census with Deirdre by my side. And this is a wonderful announcement, so please join me in congratulating her. With Deirdre's selection as chief of our Decennial Management Division, our senior leadership team within the Decennial Directorate is almost complete. I think there's no surprises with the rest of this, but I will remind you, and they're all here today. Tim Traynor, who's over on the side, somewhere, there he is. Tim Traynor is chief of our Geography Division. Pat Cantwell, who's sitting next to Tim, is chief of our Decennial Statistical Studies Division. Jim Treat, who I don't see here today, I believe he has a meeting on the American Community Survey I see ACS people here, with the National Academy of Sciences, but I don't see Jim, is our division chief of our American Community Survey Office. And we are making progress on the posting and the filling of the chief of our Decennial Information Technology Division. I was able to hear back from our Human Resources Division today, and I'm pleased to say that we hope and we expect to have that posting up in about 3 weeks. So we're very pleased about that. Since we last got together, my staff working on the reorganization have made tremendous progress since October. Some of the accomplishments that we've had, we've baselined our organizational structures. We've placed our GS-15s, our senior managers, in their new positions in the reorganization, as well as placing our branch chiefs in their new positions within the reorganization. With that said, people are not in those jobs today. Our reorganization won't take effect until the spring, but what we're doing now is going through the process of designing and implementing that reorganization to be executed later this year. We've identified the process and have actually begun the process for placing our GS-13s and our staff, and we'll actually have that complete probably in the next 6 weeks. We are on schedule still for a spring implementation of our reorganization. We've been working very, very closely hand in hand with our Human Resources Division, and we've been submitting our paperwork along the way. They've been working with us, so I feel very comfortable that this will all take effect as we have scheduled it. To aid us as we go from the old to the new, we have a number of teams working on different aspects of our reorganization. Because we've changed some of the functions of the directorate and modified how we'll be operating, we have a process alignment and clarification team that we have stood up. What this team has really done is they've baselined a RACI diagram for us, as well as determining the concepts of operations for the new divisions. So what they've looked at is they've looked at surveys, they've looked at the census, they've looked at different components of our programs and how we do our day-to-day work. And they've walked through those concept of operations for each of those and determined who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be informed, and who needs to be consulted. This helps us, as we implement our reorganization, understand those roles and responsibilities, recognizing that things will change. We're going for the 80% solution, but the more we can have documented and figured out before we step into this new environment, the better prepared we will be to execute it, and we'll continue to evolve as we work. We also have an organization and workforce alignment team. This team has been responsible, both teams have done a lot of heavy lifting, but this team has been really working hand in hand with our Human Resources Division. They're responsible for updating the organizational charts, the organizational profiles, developing the process maps at the division level, meaning the functions of what each area does. In addition to that, they've been responsible for redoing all of the position descriptions for our GS-15s and our GS-14s. They'll soon be embarking on that for our GS-13s. Anytime we do something even as simple as changing the name of a division, which we did, all of those position descriptions and the associated paperwork need to be updated, and this team has had the heavy lift for getting that done, and they've been instrumental in helping us do that. And last but not least, we've communicated. We have a communications team that's also part of our reorganization effort, and we have had multiple brown bag and all directorate meetings. I want to say since October, we've probably had 9, maybe 10. We did a series of 6, one every day, focused on each of the division, and we've done several. Our most recent being just before the holidays. I believe it was December 18th. It might have been the 16th. But we've really done the best that we can do to communicate. We also have a SharePoint site where our staff can go at any time to get information about our reorganization efforts, as well as submit questions to us. I wanted to, with that said as our accomplishments, I wanted to briefly roll out those individuals, those key individuals that are part of the 2020 census, or planning for the 2020 census. Due to time, and we are rather limited, I'm only going to focus for the next few minutes on the key staff that are involved in the census. It's not that I'm choosing to exclude other people, but most of those key staff are here. And what I'm most excited about for this PMR is our ability to share with you that management team that's going to bring this census to fruition. And so let me start with our Decennial Census Management Division. I've already shared with you that Deirdre Bishop is our chief of that division. Hand in hand with that, the rest of our senior leaders within this division, Andrea Brinson, who I did see in the room. She's over there. Will serve as the deputy chief of this division. Kim Higginbotham, who's at the head table with us today, will be leading our efforts on innovation and strategic planning. Evan Moffett, who's also at the head table. And one of the things you'll notice as we go, just as those of you that have been around for many censuses, you'll see we're starting to bring back our census people. And Evan's probably the first I'm talking about on this, though he certainly won't be the last. But Evan is our ADC for our geographic operations. Marianne Chapin, again, we're bringing back our decennial people, is our ADC for non-response and coverage operations. Ann Wittnauer, also at the head table this morning, will be our ADC for infrastructure. Mike Perez, who I didn't see he is in the room, there he is. Mike will be our ADC for budget, schedule, and performance management. He's over to your right. Jill O'Brien, who's also over to your right, is our ADC for operations and systems integration. And at our next PMR coming up, you'll get to meet Jessica Graber, who hasn't started with us. She's actually starting next week, who will be in the role to serve as our assistant division chief for self-response. So I encourage you to take some time and continue to explore this division structure. As you explore it, you'll begin to see and to recognize that we've begun to recognize that transition from moving from planning the census into implementation of the census. And you'll see, particularly for DCMD, that we have several branches that we're creating that are temporary branches that we will need to execute the census operations, and you'll see those reflected there. And before I move off DCMD, I do want to point out one other person who's not represented in DCMD, but who you all are familiar with, and that's Jim Dinwiddie, who's actually out sick this week too. So Jim and I had a lesson that both of us shouldn't be out sick at the same time. That was interesting. But he assures me he's watching this on Ustream. I didn't mention Jim within DCMD because Jim is actually going to be reporting to me in our reorganization structure. So for those of you that have been working with Jim on things related to GAO, on the IG, serving as our oversight, he'll retain that role, plus he'll continue in some other strategic roles helping me with the day-to-day operations. So I'm very excited to have Jim by my side. Moving to our Decennial Statistical Studies Division, very briefly, we've already mentioned Pat. Tom Muley is here in the room, and Tom remains in our technical position as our lead for administrative records and adaptive design research around non-response follow-up, and you'll be hearing from Tom later today. I didn't see, but she may be here, Debbie Fenstemaker. Debbie is our ADC for statistical methods, and she is the lead for our modeling efforts on address canvassing and on our cost-quality trade-off work. Magda Ramos, I thought I saw, no, Gia's telling me I don't see Magda. Magda is our ADC for matching and coverage measurement, and Magda really remains absolutely instrumental for us in the design and implementation right now of non-response follow-up. She's really played a key role on that. Bob Colosi, who I did see come in somewhere. There's Bob in the back. Bob is actually moving from our decennial management division into our Decennial Statistical Studies Division, where he's going to take on the role as the ADC for frame enumeration and quality assurance. And even as Bob is beginning to bridge this transition, he's jumped in already to help us jumpstart or kickstart, you can pick your phrase, our efforts around quality assurance and our plans for quality control, and we're very, very excited to have him in this role. And then Tony Tercine, who I did see. Many of you may be familiar with Tony, who have worked on the American Community Survey, and he's over here on this side. In our reorganization, Tony is taking on additional efforts, and he will be taking on our census evaluation and experiments work, in addition to that work for the ACS. So I'm really excited to have Tony's expertise on 2020. When I move to our geography division, Greg Hanks, who I saw in the back, Greg is going to continue to serve as our deputy chief of our geography division. Mike Ratcliffe is our ADC for geographic standards, criteria, research, and quality. And Mike, you guys know Mike. He's not here today because he's actually out in the field, and he even emailed this morning. He's conducting part of the partial block canvassing test. So he is out in Indiana, I think is where he is. And the last time he checked in yesterday, it was like -10 below or something like that. But he says all is going well, so it's good to get that report from the field. Atri Kulari is our ADC for spatial data systems and database management. I didn't see Atri in the room. Ama Danso is our ADC for address systems, and Ama has been instrumental in working with Evan and others in developing the systems that will be used for non-ID processing. And Andrea Johnson, I get my Andreas and my Andreas mixed up now, they do this to me. But Andrea Johnson, who's sitting at the head table, is our ADC for spatial, for address and spatial data updates, and she's also serving on our team for our 2020 operational plan, which you'll hear more about. So she's been instrumental in bringing that geographic perspective to our planning for 2020. Moving to DITD, our Information Technology Division, very briefly, Michael Clark will remain as our ADC for Census Applications Development and Operations. Pam Mosley will be our ADC for Data Management and Testing. And here we have a change with Pete Boudreau moving from our Geography Division into our IT Division to take on the role for Systems Engineering and Integration. This is really wonderful for us because Pete was part of the enterprise team that developed the ESDLC, and having Pete available to bring that expertise into our Information Technology Division will really help strengthen our efforts there. And Marion Brady, who I also didn't see here, is moving into the role as the Program Manager of the ADC for our dissemination system for DADS, our current dissemination system. Lastly, as I said, I'm not going to talk about ACS because the focus today is on 2020, but you do have that information for you. We have a very, very strong, if I was chief of ACS, I'd be very happy, a very strong senior leadership team within the American Community Survey Office. And with that, what I'd like to do is pass the clicker over to Deirdre and let her jump in and do a very brief program status update for us on the 2020 census. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's nice to see you. This morning, I'll provide a quick update on the 2020 program. We've been very busy since the last time we met in October of 2014. We've established a 2020 Census Operational Plan team to document the 2020 Census Design Decision. We're committed to completing our design decision for the preliminary 2020 design decision by the end of this year, and we plan to share that with you during the October PMR. We've identified 34 operations that will be part of the 2020 census life cycle. We've completed the field work associated with the 2014 census test that we conducted in Northwest DC and Montgomery County, Maryland. In November, we conducted a simulation. We called it a human-in-the-loop simulation to test our operational control system and the management of our non-response follow-up workload. We continued planning for the 2015 tests, and we defined the preliminary scope for the 2016 census tests. I think you'll agree that this was a large list of accomplishments over the past 3 months, especially when you consider Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, and all the other events that occurred during that time. I must send a huge thank you to the staff that worked on this, especially over the holidays, for their dedication and their commitment to this very important work. A quick overview of the budget, schedule, and risk in terms of 2020. We recently received our enacted budget for fiscal year 15, and we're currently preparing to update our operating plans. We're working with the Department of Commerce and the Office of Management and Budget to finalize our FY16 budget request, and we just began formulating our FY17 budget. In terms of schedule, I'm happy to say that at the end of December, we integrated and baselined our 2015 census test schedules, both for the Optimizing Self-Response test and the 2015 census test. Our certified schedulers are continuing to develop an integrated schedule for our other census tests, most importantly, the National Content Test, which will occur in September of this year. Finally, we continue to monitor and mitigate our risks, both at the program level and the project level, on a regular basis. Let's now move into the status of our major cost-saving and innovation tracks. The last time we were together, we talked about our 4 key design areas. The first is re-engineering address canvassing, and you'll remember that our goal here is to eliminate a nationwide in-field address canvassing effort late in the decade. Instead, we plan to do the work throughout the decade, both in the office and in the field. Over the past 90 days, we kicked off our address validation test. That test had 2 components. The first was the MAF model validation test. It contained 10,100 blocks and was used to validate our statistical modeling that will help us determine where to conduct in-field address canvassing. I'm happy to say that that work is finished. We also started our partial block canvassing test to see if we could go out and canvass only portions of a block as opposed to the full census block. That's the work that Lisa referred to earlier that Mike is out doing now. And Jill, I believe, will have an interesting report for you as well. She just returned from listing. We established a leadership team that will be responsible for the design, planning, and implementation of our address canvassing efforts. we've drafted requirements for the development of a system that will store and track block-level information that will be used to make decisions for our address canvassing efforts. And we've drafted requirements for an interactive tool to support imagery review, and the detection of change on the landscape. What will we be doing in the next 60 days? Very importantly, we're going to be developing the 2020 Address Canvassing Implementation Plan. We plan to release a request for information on change detection. We're currently conducting market research to identify available sources, processes, software, and technology related to detecting change, both for structures such as housing units and for street center lines such as roads. We're also going to release a request for proposal on address, feature, and imagery sources. Over the past few months, Geography Division has conducted an evaluation of commercial sources and issued a request for information on available sources of address and street center line information. These efforts lead us to believe that there are commercial sources that could really help us in terms of our address canvassing efforts moving forward, and this RFP will address that. Let's now turn to optimizing self-response. You'll remember that the goal here is to communicate the importance of the 2020 census to the public and generate the largest possible self-response. What have we done in the last 90 days? We've analyzed results from the 2014 census test, and we've planned for the 2015 Optimizing Self-Response test. You'll hear about both of those efforts today. We awarded a contract to support multilingual research for the 2020 census questionnaires. Work related to this contract will include cognitive and usability testing of both our enumeration instruments, the internet application, and the handheld device used for non-response follow-up. It will include expert review of our translation materials and focus groups to help us determine how to communicate with non-English speaking populations. We released a request for information on respondent validation and non-ID business processes. These RFIs closed on January 2nd, and we've received over 30 responses. Over the next month, we'll be reviewing the responses and moving forward with those. Finally, we released a Federal Register notice requesting comment on our 2015 National Content Test. The link to that Federal Register notice is included in the slide deck, and the comment period closes on February 2nd. Looking ahead, we'll continue to evaluate our results from the 2014 census test. We'll continue to plan for 2015 and for the National Content Test. Let's now talk about using administrative records. The goal is to use data that the public has already provided to the government, and in some instances third-party data, to reduce the non-response follow-up workload. I'm very happy to announce that in partnership with the IRS, we have secured early delivery of the tax year 14 data to use during our 2015 census test. Why is this important? Because our census day is traditionally April 1st. Having the IRS data early and applying that to our non-response follow-up universe is very important to provide accurate and timely statistics. We've completed documenting our production process for identifying the vacant units and the occupied units during the 2014 census test. We've completed a comparison of methodologies for classifying the quality of administrative records. That paper was published in September, and we're happy to share the findings with you. We've completed an analysis of determining the census day address for a partner file we received from the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance participants. And then we compared that data to the IRS data, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services database, and our 2010 Census non-response follow-up information in New York City. Looking ahead, we'll continue to determine the methodology for the use of administrative records in support of identifying vacant units and occupied units in the 2015 census test, and we will continue to evaluate the results from 2014, especially the use of administrative records in helping with account and characteristic imputation. Our last key design area is reengineering field operation, and one of the most exciting areas. The goal here is to make our field operations more effective and more efficient by using technology to perform tasks that have historically been performed by humans. What have we done in the last 90 days? A lot of work here. We conducted the human-in-the-loop simulation that Stephanie Studs will talk about this morning. In preparation for the 2015 census test, we've further refined and enhanced our tools. On the COMPASS instrument, which is the instrument that we use to obtain information from our non-responding households, we've now built in the ability for our enumerators to enter their time and expense data and to enter their work availability to help us better assign cases. We've tested the ability to receive and transfer data between COMPASS, the handheld instrument, and Mojo, our operational control system, in our mobile enterprise development environment. And we've shared Mojo and COMPASS and 8 automated training modules with our regional census center staff to obtain feedback on our plans for 2015. Looking ahead, we still have more work to do here. We're going to author another training module for our local supervisor of operations, and we will prepare, most importantly, for production as part of the 2015 census test. You're going to hear more about all of these activities today, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, if we don't have questions, we are like right on time, which is awesome. So I'm going to take the honor to introduce our next presentation, which will be by Ann Wittnauer and team. And the reason why I'm doing this is that our next presentation is on our 2020 Census Operational Plan. So I've been now back for over a year now, and what I've heard, people have asked questions and we've said, these are our answers, this is where we are with the program, but when we release that design decision, that answer will be in that. What Ann is going to talk with you about next, and what the team is going to talk with you about next, is how we're getting to that design decision. At our last PMR, Deirdre presented a document that we called the Path to the Design Decision, the Path to the 2020 Census. We've taken from that path document and have started a team, which Ann will talk more about, that is working on our 2020 Census Operational Plan. This operational plan is critical to us, but it's also critical to you and to our stakeholders. It's very important that we all understand what we mean by the 2020 Census Operational Plan, what will be contained within the 2020 Census Operational Plan, and how this plan will continue to evolve over time. And the team is going to talk you through that today. I'm very, very excited about the work that they've done to date and the work that we have planned for the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year. But our focus today will really be on setting that stage for us. With that, let me turn it over to Ann and to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. As Lisa mentioned, I'm the project manager for the team responsible for developing the 2020 Census Operational Plan. Today, I'm here with a few of my teammates to talk with you about our progress toward a comprehensive set of documentation, an operational plan for the 2020 census, emphasizing the preliminary design decision, and also addressing what we know and what we don't know about the operational areas proposed for the next decennial census. As you listen to what we're about to discuss, please bear in mind this presentation is a continuation, as Lisa and Deirdre alluded to, of what you heard back in October when we presented the path to the 2020 design decisions. Today, I will talk with you about the teams that will spearhead this effort, propelling us into the next phase of preparations for the 2020 census. Several of my teammates, Andrea Johnson, Evan Moffett, and Marianne Chapin, will expound upon a few key examples that illustrate what you'll be seeing when the operational plan is available for public review in October of this year. And let me add, before we officially begin, that the work products you're going to hear about today are preliminary and thus pre-decisional. So without further ado, let's dig in. Next slide. Let me provide some context for this team. Let's step back a moment and review where we are. This year puts us on the cusp of major milestones for the program, as you see in this notional timeline of the 2020 census life cycle. In late September of this year, the Census Bureau will formally announce the preliminary design of the 2020 census, the goal of which is to enable us to conduct a 2020 census at a lower cost per household, adjusted for inflation, than the 2010 census, while maintaining high quality. To that end, we will conduct 3 tests this year that will inform the design decision. And thus, 2015 is the culmination of the formal research and test phase. 2015 is pivotal for other reasons as well. We're going to conduct a 4th test that will inform and seed future tests, the testing we propose in fiscal year 16, 17, and beyond that's required for our upcoming operational work. Additionally, in 2015, we're launching the start of our core programmatic work. And by this, I mean we'll begin to work on census coverage measurement, the language programs, the medium and smaller sized operations, if you will, that to date have been largely unaddressed in our research efforts. When fiscal year 2015 winds down, we'll be on the eve of an intensive period of preparation with 5 major activities. The first, I've mentioned, additional operational research. The second, development and award of contracts for the systems that we will use in the 2020 census. We'll be putting management infrastructure and offices in place. We'll be conducting operational readiness testing, and in some cases, we'll actually be implementing early operations like the local update of census addresses, which Andrea will talk a little bit more in detail shortly. So without a doubt, the design decision, the associated CONOPS, and the supporting documentation, this whole package that we're calling the 2020 Census Operational Plan, lays the foundation for this entire phase of which we're about to embark. This phase in which we see a significant uptick in tempo as we march to 2020 and begin to operationalize our research. So clearly, the operational plan must be solid. So I'm going to tell you now about the work we've done to get it underway. Next slide. What are we going to brief at the October Program Management Review? Let me define what I mean by the 2020 Census Operational Plan. As I said a minute ago, it really is what we call a set of documentation. And come October, we will baseline version 1 of this documentation. I say version 1, as you would expect, because not all research questions will be answered by the end of this fiscal year, nor will all 2020 census-related decisions be made in this time frame. We fully expect that further research, testing, and stakeholder recommendations will refine the design decisions released in our operational plan. Next slide. So what constitutes this set of documentation? We've identified 3 elements or buckets of work that will be included in the 2020 Census Operational Plan. First, the concept of operations, or CONOPS for short. It will be the core of this operational plan, and I'll discuss it more in detail in just a minute. Supporting documentation is the second element. These are the appendices. Some examples of what we'll include are things such as business process models for each operation, the IT architecture, a detailed census lifecycle cost model estimate based on the major design decisions. Another example, the acquisition strategy for the 2020 census. Similarly, equally important, a high-level schedule, and also a program risk register, to name just a few of the documents we intend to include within the supporting documentation. The third element of our operational plan consists of what we've called communication tools. By that I mean infographics, videos. These are the materials that we will need to convey to our stakeholder community how we will execute the census. Next slide. Now, let me explain further what I mean by the 2020 CONOPS. The CONOPS describes how the 2020 program will operate to execute our strategic plan. It describes the operational intent and context and will be used to drive how the 2020 census will be executed. Within the operational plan, our CONOPS will include a heavy focus on the 4 key design areas: re-engineering address canvassing, optimizing self-response, utilizing administrative records, and re-engineering field operations. These design areas, as you know, are the biggest operations in terms of cost. Additionally, our CONOPS will include information, what we know today or by the end of September, regarding the rest of the 2020 census operational areas. And I should stress that the narrative for both the key design areas and the other operational areas will have varying levels of maturity based on the research and implementation work completed to date. This is important to note because the CONOPS we release in October as part of the operational plan will document, as I said, what we know and then what still needs to be researched in order to determine the final design. Now, then for each of the operations within the CONOPS, you're going to hear the description of the proposed operations. For example, that we propose to combine non-response follow-up and field verification. You're going to hear about the key decisions and those that still need to be made and our working assumptions. You'll see the milestones that we've laid out for when key decisions need to be made. For example, build versus buy decisions for the acquisition, for the systems that we'll be using in the census. You're also going to read about the research completed to date and that which is required in the next phase of the life cycle. We're going to include cost and quality trade-offs. What are the changes, for example, that we're proposing in relation to 2010? Lastly, in the CONOPS, we will include a listing of the IT capabilities that will support the operational implementation of our census. A little later in this presentation, you'll get some concrete examples from my teammates of what we mean by each of these and what you can expect to see come October. Next slide. You're probably wondering who is behind this critical effort. Actually, it's the team of people who are documenting it. On this slide, you see a complementary mix of people from the 2020 census and the Decennial Census Program directorates, along with our key partnering directorates, the Research and Methodology Directorate, the Information Technology Directorate, and the Field Directorate. We are very fortunate, in fact, to have Harry Lee, the Deputy Chief Information Officer, Peter Miller, the Senior Researcher for Survey Measurement, and Al Fontenot, the Chicago Regional Director, to round out our team with their expertise. Now, clearly, this is and must be a team effort to do the level of integration that will be required for an operational plan of this size and magnitude. So I would be remiss if I did not talk to you about the rest of the team, those people not listed on this slide. Many other folks, many of whom are in this room or watching live, have been tapped or will be soon, I assure you, to contribute to this effort. And by this, I'm referring to the R&T and implementation teams for the 2020 census, stakeholders in other divisions, other directorates such as communications and administration, participating divisions such as the Population Division and the Social, Economic, and Housing Statistics Division, to name just a few. Next slide. As you heard in October, when Deirdre presented the path to the 2020 census design decision, and even earlier this morning, we are focusing our preliminary design decision on the 4 key design areas, because these are the areas that have the potential to help us achieve tremendous cost savings if planned and implemented correctly. Re-engineering address canvassing. If we can successfully eliminate a nationwide in-field address canvassing in 2019, we estimate a potential savings of $1 billion. Optimizing self-response. If we can communicate the importance of the 2020 census to the United States population and generate the largest possible self-response, thus eliminating the need for the follow-up with these households, we estimate a potential for $548 million in savings. Utilizing administrative records. If we can use data that the public has already provided to the government and reduce the non-response follow-up workload, we estimate a potential savings of $1.2 billion. And last but certainly not least, re-engineering field operations. If we can use technology, such as our enhanced operational control system, to more efficiently and effectively manage the 2020 census field work, we estimate a potential for $2.3 billion in savings. It's a lot of money. Next slide. Against this backdrop of a potential life cycle cost reduction amounting to just over $5 billion, the team's objectives are threefold. We'll gather and document information. We'll create a narrative that includes all of the proposed operational areas, but focuses heavily on the 4 key design areas and the ways in which they influence the other operations. The second focus will integrate results from the tests to examine combinations of design components in order to derive that preliminary design decision. And third, we're going to keep you, our stakeholders, informed. We'll be conducting briefings, and we'll be developing the materials to communicate our major design decisions and the associated CONOPS in the upcoming operational plan. Next slide. So, what have we been able to accomplish thus far with these objectives? Let's look at the to-do list. We kicked off the team a week before Thanksgiving on November 20th. We have a signed team charter, a preliminary life cycle cost estimate in the 4 areas of innovation. We have a draft table of contents, which serves as our outline and includes the entire set of supporting documentation. We have the list of proposed operations for the 2020 decennial census. We have an inventory consisting of the research informing our operational design and then the future operational research that is still needed in fiscal year 16, 17, and beyond. We've also worked on updating key activities in the fiscal year 16 and 17 life cycle. Now, bear in mind, most of these work products are preliminary and thus pre-decisional. A few, like the original signed team charter, will be posted on our website with the PMR materials. But the point I'm making, we have a framework in place for the operational plan. The foundation is laid, and over the next few months, we'll be building it out. Well, maybe 6 or 9 months. So, next slide. As I spoke to a few moments ago, one of the key objectives for the team is to keep our stakeholders informed and engaged, both those within and outside the 2020 census program. Here's how we plan to do it. At the heart of this effort are the 2020 research and implementation teams. I think of them as the bedrock of our program. And these teams will contribute to the operational plan, that is the writing and/or reviewing of narratives that flesh out the CONOPS. They will also assist with or prepare and review supporting documentation, such as the 2020 acquisition strategy or the revised high-level life cycle schedule. Twice a month, maybe more, the team and I will reach out to this core group of people through the 2020 Program Leads Forum or directly when needed. My team, the 2020 Census Operational Plan team, along with the folks supporting them, will lead the effort to integrate results from tests, both the tests already conducted and those still to come, either as part of our research phase or the later operational research. Our focus will be to examine combination of design components to derive a preliminary design decision and then refine it. This team is also tasked with providing updates to the various stakeholders represented on this diagram. Our team meets on average 3 to 4 times per week, barring Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, and illness. The leadership group for the operational plan provides guidance on a day-in and day-out basis. These are the division chiefs from the Decennial Management Division, Decennial Statistical Studies Division, the Geography Division, and the Acting Associate Director for the Decennial Census. They attend our team meetings as much as possible and regularly work with us to address issues. The Decennial Leadership Group, which has representation from all of the participating divisions in the 2020 program, will receive updates on average twice per month and provide guidance as needed. The 2020 Executive Steering Committee will be briefed as we have materials that are ready to share or when we need their guidance. As an example, we met with them in December to vet the table of contents for the operational plan, as well as our proposed list of operations for the next census. And last but not least are our external stakeholders. Like today, we will leverage the quarterly program management reviews to provide updates while our work is still pre-decisional. And then, as you've heard, we will use the October program management review to brief the operational plan in its entirety. Similarly, we will use existing advisory committee meetings and like forums to engage with other external stakeholders. The goals are simply dialogue early and often, opportunities for senior leadership to review documentation on a flow basis, and ultimately a complete and high-quality operational plan that enables us to design and execute an accurate and efficient census. Easy for me to say. Next slide. You've heard a lot about the key design areas, and these, of course, will be emphasized in the 2020 Census Operational Plan. In October, however, you'll see what we are envisioning for the other operational areas. Our documentation will summarize what we know and what we still need to figure out about the full scope of the 2020 census, as delineated on this slide. And as Deirdre said, if you don't remember, there are 34, so you don't need to count. Last time around, we had 44 operations. So what are we proposing to change this time? I'm going to talk you through 2 changes that we are testing and where we have consolidated several operations into one. Next slide. As discussed at the March Program Management Review in 2013, the 2020 program undertook an effort to consolidate field operations. The working assumption is through the use of technology, we can reduce the number of field operations and make the 2020 census more efficient. Based on the research, we are moving forward with plans to test a consolidated update leave, update enumerate, and remote update enumerate. We're referring to this as an update enumerate program, and we'll test this in April of 2017. We're also moving forward with plans to test a consolidated version of non-response follow-up, where we will recycle cases that traditionally would go to field verification into the non-response follow-up workload. This, too, will be tested in the coming years. The hope is this consolidation will allow us to manage fewer operations, consolidate training, and potentially hire fewer staff. We also anticipate operational efficiencies because we're reducing the lag time between canvassing and enumeration. Next slide, please. And so now, with the help of my teammates, I would like to elaborate further on the level of detail and maturity you can expect to see in the CONOPS portion of the 2020 Census Operational Plan. We'll give you a few examples, And in this deeper dive, you'll hear about the operation described at a very high level. You'll hear about the accomplishments, the research and the analysis activities that have been completed to date, and then you'll hear what we anticipate going forward, such as where we propose operational research and what development activities will be needed. Now, bear in mind, what you're hearing is not meant to be a detailed discussion of the operation itself, but rather an illustration of what you will see come October. So, with that context in mind, let me turn the floor over to Andrea Johnson, who will speak to you about the local update of census addresses.
Hi, thanks, Ann. I'm going to be covering the LUCA program over the next few minutes, and I wanted to reiterate some of the things that Ann just said. My presentation will really be how we're going to treat LUCA in the operational plan that you'll see in October, and it will be an overview of sort of where we are and where we need to be before we begin to execute the program. What it's not going to be, and what I'm, hopefully no one's waiting with bated breath, is an overview of what we're going to do with 2020 LUCA, because at this point, I have 10 minutes, and I think we have more to say about LUCA than that. Okay, so, all right, you're on the right side. So what is LUCA? Just in case you didn't know, LUCA is a partnership program that provides an opportunity prior to the 2020 census for designated representatives from local, state, and tribal governments to review our address before the census, basically. Like 2010, 2020 LUCA is a really important program because it gives government partners, sorry, I'm going to get all close to Evan now. Government partners an opportunity to review and comment on our list and then submit feedback to us and then see what happened after address canvassing. So really it's their last shot to look at our list before we start the census. We do hope to streamline many aspects of the program since 2010, always improving things, to improve the experience and outcome for both the partners and for the Census Bureau. So with this in mind, when you see the operational plan, you'll see several assumptions that we're making about each of the operations. Now I'm going to cover those. So for LUCA, the assumptions that we're making at this time are that the LUCA 2020 program will be simplified from the 2010 program, and that it will be compatible with the GSSI, or Geographic Support Systems Initiative. That's the program that we've been doing over the decade to improve the MAF and Tiger using partner data, and with the re-engineered address canvassing. It's been mentioned several times at previous PMRs and just earlier, our efforts with re-engineering address canvassing include doing part of it in the field and part of it in the office. So we have to consider that when we're developing LUCA. We are making the assumption that address canvassing will be used to validate the 2020 LUCA submissions. And again, that would be both in office and in field. This will, again, impact the design, and so we anticipate having to coordinate very closely with the address canvassing team. We are also assuming that administrative records and possibly third-party data such as imagery or possibly third-party address data will be available for our validation of LUCA submissions. Now, I'm not saying at this time we haven't determined the specifics on how exactly we're going to use that data. Again, working with our colleagues on the address canvassing team, we're going to develop some procedures over the next several months. But we do think it will be useful to have this data available to validate LUCA in office. And lastly, and not leastly, we are making the assumption that the Geographic Update Partnership Software, or what we're calling GUPS, will be available for LUCA participants. The GUPS software is the replacement for the MAF Tiger Partnership Software, or MTPS, that we've been using for the last 10 years. And it's a partnership software that we're using in all of our geographic programs for 2020, such as BAS, BBSP, and eventually LUCA. Next slide. So a key component of the 2020 Census Operational Plan is identifying and the completed research and research that needs to be completed, or things that we've identified that we need to research for each of the 34 operations. Luca is in a unique situation in that, unlike my colleagues here, Luca starts in 2017, so we have a little less runway to finish some of our research, but we still have quite a bit of research to do. So on this slide, what I'm going to cover is what we've done to date and what we're planning to do. And these, again, would be things that we're going to cover in that operational plan. So I'm just doing the deep dive in the operational plan. Just for your sanity, if you can see the slide, and this is going to be the same for all three of us, the checks determine research that's already been complete, and the open circles indicate research that's underway, but I can't say that today in January it's complete, but it will be by the end of the year. Okay, so let's cover some of this completed research and development that's occurred from 2012 to 2015. Mostly, and most importantly, we've been identifying several improvements for the 2020 LUCA program. So as part of the research and development efforts, staff have been evaluating 2010 LUCA, both in terms of its procedures, various lessons learned, and various surveys that were conducted after LUCA, and also conducting a series of focus groups around the country with former LUCA participants to understand what worked, what didn't work, and also new suggestions that local participants have based on sort of where we are in the technological 2015 realm, I guess is the best way to say. Staff have been working hard on this, and as a result have pulled it together into 12 recommendations for 2020 LUCA. An example of one of these recommendations would be it would be useful to use structure coordinates both on the materials going out to participants and potentially on materials coming in, so we could see where people think the housing units are on their list. So these will be detailed in a report, and I'm going to read the name of the report, but it's long. The 2020 Census Local Update of Census Address Program Improvement Project Recommendation Report. So basically a recommendation report is in review right now, and we'll make that available as soon as it's finalized. With the 12 recommendations and the work that the team did in looking back, we need to still look at the feasibility of several of the methodological and technological changes. Some we're going to need to look at in the short term in 2015, and some we can put into 2016, and I'm going to cover that. And last but not least, I think it's important that all this research in some capacity needs to be developed so that we can develop an implementation plan and an appeals process. So, okay, so one of the first pieces of research that we need to do that we're in process of doing and in process of doing with our ADCAN colleagues is determining how in-office canvassing procedures will be used to validate addresses submitted by local governments. And because of its direct relationship with ADCAN, many of the research questions and how-tos required to define how we're going to do LUCA will also impact address canvassing. So we're working part and parcel. We're also researching additional sources of data that could be used for independent in-office validation of addresses. With the concepts of re-engineering canvassing, address canvassing, we will have to do some of our validation in the office, and we have to make sure that we're doing that effectively. Again, we're working with our partners in address canvassing, and in terms of researching resources that we could use, specifically how we might use these resources and this data, like imagery or address sources. Is it effective using it? And also, is there an interrelationship between some of this data? So for instance, if somebody provided, an entity provided data in GSSI, we made updates, and then they provided similar data in LUCA, can we use the data that they provided in GSSI knowing that it probably came from the exact same source? These are questions that we're going to have to really kind of mull over in the next year. Last but not least, we have to put together all of this stuff that I'm talking about into a 2020 LUCA implementation plan, i.e. write it down. And I think once we do that, once more research has been completed, we'll be able to do that. This operational plan for LUCA, or this implementation plan for LUCA will be a key input into the 2020 operational plan, which is what I'm giving you the deep dive about now. So we've also we're not done in the end of this year, even though Luca begins in 2017. We'll be continuing research in 16 and 17. Once we've defined an appropriate appeals, or we will obviously have to work with OMB to define an appeals process. And a lot of that depends on sort of how we're doing things. So what is the design of Luca? What did we come up with in 2015? And also, what's the design of AdCan? Because I think appeals is going to depend greatly on the marriage of those two things. Once we know more, we're going to engage you. We need to research the feasibility and usability of various technological improvements to Luca, including the use of background imagery on paper maps. Now, while the goal of the census, and you've heard this repeatedly, is to have a paperless census, or what I'd like to call a less paper census, we know one size doesn't fit all, especially for many of our partnership programs. We're going to get a glimpse of that in this year's all digital BAS to see how well that's performing, how well we're able to reach people. So for Luca right now, we're investigating ways to improve some of those materials in the meantime. I mentioned previously another one of the 12 recommendations was to look at structure locations and how we could both provide those to local governments so that they could understand where we think various addresses are, and then also potentially receive those back from local governments. This idea came out of a lot of our work on the GSSI, where we've received structure locations and they're really helpful. And it helps us tremendously review our data against the locals' data, and also just kind of understand what people are trying to communicate. So if at all possible, we'd like to make that happen in Luca. But we have to figure out, how that works out. And last but not least, we're looking at the feasibility of web-based registration for Luca. This will help simplify and streamline the process for registering for the program, regardless of what type of material you're getting. There's a lot of paper shuffling back and forth to get permission to get Luca materials and what type you'd like. So it would be great if we could do that over the web. This is in alignment with several of our other programs. However, Luca has the interesting and unique and fun challenge of being Title 13, so we just need to make sure that that's feasible. Next slide. Last but not least, within the 2020 Census Operational Plan, if we go back to if you remember that slide with all the dots, we're going to talk quite a bit about the IT requirements for each of the programs, or each operation. So for Luca, some of the IT capabilities we're going to be addressing in the plan are developing and testing the GUPS partnership software functionality required for Luca participants. I kind of glossed, I gave an introduction to GUPS on my previous slide. This is the software essentially that locals will have available to participate in the program if they choose to go that route. So they'll be able to make updates or review what our address list and our geographic information is, and make updates and submit them back in a very standardized format. And we're using the GUP software not only for Luca, but for all of our geographic partnership programs for the 2020 census. So the Luca component of GUPS has yet to be developed. Right now we're focusing on more of the other geographic programs that are starting first, such as Block Boundary Suggestion Program, or BBSP. But they're all going to be complementary and hopefully use some of the same core functionality. So it's an IT capability for Luca that it's similar to the sense that we were partnering with AdCan on in-office review. GUPS is a software where Luca will partner with other geographic programs to achieve the same goal through a similar software. And last but not least, and this is a big bullet. I could spend 20 minutes on this alone. We need to develop systems to create, process, and evaluate Luca submissions. So basically, we have to develop systems within GEO that will create Luca materials, take them back in with all the comments that are coming back in, evaluate what people have given us, and then match Luca materials up to AdCan and produce feedback materials. So while some of that might be old hat from 2010, or we might have some components of that as we develop GUPS and other programs, it's still quite a bit of work. And then keeping in mind from my earlier slide, we're going to be working with Luca or AdCan and some of our GSS colleagues to kind of figure out how we can, reuse some of the same concepts and methodologies across all programs that are doing in-office canvassing. Okay, so that's all I have time for. That's your Luca update for today. I hope you have a better understanding of Luca a little bit, but also mostly what you're going to be seeing in that operational plan come October. There's many things that we're going to be putting in that plan that are just sort of documenting the road ahead. And the plan is fantastic for those of us that are working on operations because it really does chart out what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. So without further ado, back to you, Ann.
Thank you, Andrea. So at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to Evan, who will be talking, sketching out, if you will, what you can expect to read in the operational plan about address canvassing.
Thank you, Ann and Andrea. You're going to hear some recurring themes here. We're going to repeat ourselves with the hope that we're setting expectations around what you will see in this document in October. So what I'm going to talk about today is kind of a high-level overview of address canvassing. The components we envisioned at this point are working assumptions, completed research, examples of planned research, and the IT enabling capabilities that we think we will need to support the 2020 address canvassing program. So to begin with, what is address canvassing? And I think that we're all pretty familiar with the fact that this is a foundation of the census. It is how we build the frame. And so our intention with this program is to implement a methodology to build an accurate list of addresses for each block that meets the objectives of the 2020 program. So how are we going to do this? Again, this is today's thinking, and this is going to evolve, but there are various components around address canvassing. The first one would be, how are we going to canvass? Do we canvass in field? Do we canvass in office? Are we able to pull out various portions of the country? So I worked in Denver in 2010, and we did address canvassing in remote areas, and then we did update leave in remote areas. And so we may have some opportunities in 2020 to simply not cover the ground twice if we deem that that's not necessary. But I want to stress that our intention is to ensure that we have 100% coverage of addresses for the 2020 program moving forward. As has been presented in a number of previous PMRs and was mentioned earlier, there are some basic assumptions around address canvassing that are leading or originating from the 2020 census design decision, and those are listed here. First of all, we plan to only in-field canvass 20% of the housing units. Secondly, to get to the cost savings objective, we will eliminate the early local census offices. Third, we'll reduce the number of crew leader assistants by 1/2 over what we had in 2010. We'll redesign a training strategy to reduce enumerator training hours by 35%. And we'll establish a training pay rate $1.50 lower than the production pay rate. All of these elements combined, as you heard earlier, we anticipate could result in a cost savings of roughly $1 billion. Next slide. So as part of the 2020 operational plan, we'll document the research completed to date, and what I mean by to date, what we have completed by the end of 2015. And one of the elements of that research that will be done is the address validation test, and there are two components, as was mentioned earlier, the map model validation test and the partial block canvas test. I'm not going to go into any details on that right now. You're going to hear from me later this afternoon when I give you some more information on that. Additional research that will be done is the in-office canvas and validation of the business process and procedures. So Andrea mentioned earlier that from a LUCA perspective, we need to figure out how we might validate some of those records in-house as opposed to in the field. So there's an opportunity to leverage the work of the LUCA team as well as the address canvassing team to define a common set of procedures that will allow us to complete some of this work in-house, again, as opposed to going to the field to save money. So that work will be done by the end of this year as well. We will also issue, as was stated earlier, a 2020 address canvassing implementation plan. We currently have on the street a request for information for change detection, and by February there will be a request for proposal for commercial data and services acquisition, and this is intended to provide us with data on addresses, imagery, and those sorts of things to help us shape how we are able to conduct address canvassing moving forward. So those are examples of the research that will be done by the end of this year that will then, of course, feed the implementation plan, which will then feed the 2020 operational plan. Next slide, please. So in addition to the research that's done by the end of this fiscal year, you can expect to see additional work outlined in the 2020 operational plan. Examples of this include, we will refine our methodologies to ensure in-office canvassing meets the program's quality objectives. We will also refine the methodology to make sure that the in-field canvassing meets the program's quality objectives. We'll refine our methodologies to resolve on geocoded addresses. We are optimistic that this will be done via an in-office canvassing or validation operation. We will also define the field infrastructure, so in other words, the personnel that are needed to support the in-field canvassing. You're going to hear later, and you've heard in past PMRs about the Rocket team and the framework that is created. We need to work with Steph and her team to understand how that structure could be implemented for address canvassing. And then, how do we use automation to more effectively and efficiently manage the staff that is collecting the data? There are a number of IT enabling capabilities that we will build or we have that we will leverage for 2020 that will be documented in the operational plan. Examples of these include the tools that we'll use for imagery analysis or geographic review for the in-office portion of canvassing. From an in-field perspective, we have every intention of using the corporate listing and mapping system as well as the enhanced operational control system. So for those of you that are familiar with the listing and mapping instrument, that is a part of that corporate listing and mapping system, and we will be using that in 2020. Both of those systems that were just mentioned are part of the SEDCAP initiative. And then lastly, we will outline our methods for how we plan to evaluate the work that we are doing to ensure that the frame is where the frame needs to be to meet the objectives of the 2020 program. So we, and I will speak about this a little later this afternoon, we plan to implement an ongoing MAF coverage study, which will collect data in the field that will allow us to compare back to what our planned implementation was. We'll also use the statistical modeling to estimate coverage in the MAF. And finally, we will use the microsimulator to assess the trade-off between cost and quality. And I believe you've heard about that last piece at a previous PMR. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Ann.
Thank you, Evan. I'm going to quickly pass the microphone down to Mary Ann, and she's going to provide a similar overview of what you can expect to read next fall regarding the non-response follow-up operation.
Thank you, Ann and Evan. As both Andrea and Evan alluded to specific to LUCA and address canvassing, my presentation today is not meant to be a detailed discussion of the non-response follow-up operation. Rather, the discussion is to illustrate what you can expect to see about the non-response follow-up operation in the 2020 Census Operational Plan this October. The 2020 non-response follow-up program is, at its core, the integration of software, systems, and procedures designed for the purpose of determining housing unit status and enumerating housing units that did not self-respond. Unlike the 2010 census, where enumerators determined housing unit status and enumerated housing units using paper questionnaires, in the 2020 census, we plan to use automated data collection tools for the enumeration of those housing units. And our research is focused on administrative records and how they can be used for the removal of vacant and deleted units, as well as the enumeration of housing units to reduce the overall non-response follow-up workload. You'll hear about our 2014 test results later this afternoon, and you'll see that we are learning about, but there's much more to be done. In addition to our continued administrative records research, our out-year work will also focus on developing the non-response follow-up operation quality control capabilities, which to this point has really not begun. You've heard a lot over the past few PMRs about the 4 key innovation design areas that are focused on the potential to achieve significant cost savings. While the non-response follow-up program, with the non-response follow-up program, we see the influence of many aspects of the research underway coming together to inform the design of the 2020 census non-response follow-up. For example, within utilizing administrative records and re-engineering field operations, including adaptive design, as well as efforts across the enterprise to develop and enhance our IT system solutions, they will all shape what becomes the non-response operation for 2020. What we know about how these pieces are coming together and the work still need to be done will form the operational plan and what you will see in October related to non-response follow-up. Next slide, please. As with LUCA and address canvassing, to be documented in the 2020 operational plan are assumptions that we've made and are working to achieve in order to meet our goal of conducting the 2020 census at a per housing unit cost at or below that of the 2010 census while maintaining high quality results. These assumptions focus our research and have established goals that we hope to meet or exceed for non-response follow-up. While by no means an exhaustive list, examples of the NRFU assumptions you can expect to see in the operational plan and that are currently documented in the 2020 Path to the Design Decision document include reducing the total non-response follow-up workload by 11% through the removal of vacants and deletes, removal of late responses from the non-response follow-up workload, a reduction in the total number of local census offices, the elimination of crew leaders for non-response follow-up, and achieving a goal of having 75% of our enumerators bring their own device to the job. Next slide, please. In addition, continuing with our assumptions, as you heard in Evan's presentation, we are also working toward reducing the training strategy, redesigning the training strategy to reduce the enumerator training hours by 35% and establishing a training pay rate that is $1.50 lower per hour than the hourly production pay rate. We're also working to increase NRFU productivity by 20% through the use of automation and using adaptive design to allocate resources more efficiently. We'll also introduce a variable contact strategy with an average of 3 attempts per case. A variable contact strategy affords us the opportunity to make more attempts for a case when needed. We are working toward being able to identify housing units where only one visit or one attempt is needed for the enumeration, and also to identify those housing units where more attempts are needed, perhaps 3, perhaps 6, perhaps more, and able to ensure consistent completion rates for all areas. As a final example of one of our assumptions, we will eliminate the vacant delete check operation and the coverage follow-up operation as you may have known them in the 2010 census. Next slide, please. The 2020 operational plan you will see in October will document our research and development activities that have been completed to that point in time. Since the 2020 research and testing phase began in fiscal year 2012, We have completed activities towards reaching key design decisions. But there is much more work to be done before a final operational design will be known for the non-response follow-up operation. Again, although not an exhaustive list, you can expect to see in the operational plan results from the following work that has been accomplished or will be accomplished by the end of this fiscal year. Work we have completed includes the 2013 and 2014 census tests, in which we tested administrative records usage to identify and remove vacant and occupied units from the workload, adaptive design to guide procedures and allocate resources, a reduced contact strategy, and automated data collection, what you know as the COMPASS, was used in the 2014 test. We recently completed the CIMEX, or the Human in the Loop test, which you're going to hear much more about from Stephanie in the next presentation. Next slide, please. Work we also expect to complete and document in the operational plan includes, as part of our 2015 census test, enhancements to administrative records usage to identify and remove vacant and occupied units from the workload, adaptive design, a reduced contact strategy, enhancements to the COMPASS, and the enhanced operational control system. In addition, by the end of 2015, we will determine our approach to the using administrative records, meaning we'll decide whether we will use administrative records for the removal of vacants and deletes. We will decide how we will use, or if we will use administrative records for enumeration of the population. In addition, we will determine our approach to processing administrative records. And by this I mean how the various files work together and how they will integrate with other components of the 2020 design. Associated with that, we will also identify the resources needed to develop, test, and implement that solution. And we will identify and document other key decision points associated with aspects of administrative records usage. Next slide, please. As stated before, the operational plan will document the work that still remains to be done before we have a complete 2020 census design for the non-response follow-up program. Examples of work that will be done in FY16 and beyond include completing the actual work to implement the administrative records processing capabilities and solutions, reaching decisions on which administrative records we will use to support the 2020 non-response follow-up, understanding and documenting the quality implications associated with administrative records, and certainly, not least of all, determining the operational timeline for the non-response follow-up, as well as much, much more. Next slide, please. Finally, the 2020 operational plan will include information about the IT capabilities needed to support non-response follow-up. Examples of IT capabilities that you will see for non-response follow-up include the data collection application, or the COMPASS, the enhanced operational control system, concurrent analysis and estimation system, the control and response data system, an administrative records database, and capabilities to continue to support simulations and modeling. In terms of ongoing evaluations that we will be conducting specific to the non-response follow-up operational design, we will be doing ongoing acquisition and assessment of administrative records and third-party data sources, and ongoing evaluation and assessment of adaptive design approaches and operational implementation strategies on cost and quality. So as you can see, the 2020 operational plan will contain a lot of information about the non-response follow-up. There will be things that we know and a lot of things that we need to learn. And with that, I'll turn it back to Ann to wrap up.
Thank you, Mary Ann. So for those of you in the audience or who are watching live, I hope that these examples have given you a good taste, shall we say, of what is to come in the fall. So In summarizing, as we conclude the introduction to our operational plan and the team that is behind it, you can see we've laid out the foundation for the operational plan by appointing a dedicated interdirectorate team. We have an outline for the 34 operations that we've established. We started writing early pre-decisional iterations of the CONOPS, and we're including in that section the inventories of work that's been done, that which is still needed, and a whole host of research questions to inform the fiscal year 16, 17, and beyond. Looking ahead over the next few months, one of the key focus items for our team will be conducting informal content reviews. And by that, I mean, over the course of several afternoons or more, we'll be bringing to Lisa and the the operational leadership group, early iterations of the narratives to get their feedback. And then, by late February, we anticipate having our first draft in place. Farther downstream, we'll see a couple more drafts before the final draft that goes to the director in June. And then on September 30th of 2015, we will baseline version 1 of the 2020 Census Operational Plan, which will then be briefed to you in October. Of course, I want to reiterate before we conclude, we're going to be updating this operational plan over the course of the next several years, since not all research questions and decisions can be made in this time frame, as you've heard through the examples provided by my teammates. In fact, we anticipate the final version of the operational plan won't be released most likely until after the apportionment and redistricting counts, to reflect not only what we planned, but what we actually did for the 2020 census. So we'll be keeping you informed, handling revisions by change control and governance, and as I said, keeping you informed along the way. So as you can see, completing the operational plan in its first version by September of 30th is going to be a huge accomplishment. Not only because it is a lot to integrate and to document, but it's going to be 3 years earlier than we did it last decade. So come April, I'll be back to talk with you at the next program management review to let you know about our further progress. Are there any questions?
Sorry. Tricia Durr from Office of Inspector General, Commerce Department. It's great to see you all, and it's the team is coming together, the new team. So I guess from my perspective, I see a lot of institutional knowledge gathering again and regathering, and a lot of flux between now and April, and it's been going on for some time, people finding their roles in all of this important work. Can you give us an example of, or can you tell us, ballpark, I guess, how many people are involved? And would you characterize the teams? I think generally the teams, the project teams are matrixed across divisions. And is the budget reflecting the project level information? And I guess just kind of along this line of, I guess, a human capital type question, people are still doing, you know, their noses are to the grindstone doing the training, doing the research that they have been tasked to do since, I guess, 2011 or 2012. So and I hear really good things, you know, a lot of communication and so on. Is that what kind of issues do you see as a result of this sense of flux, which has to be somewhat of a distraction? Is it impacting the research and answering the research questions?
So there were a lot of questions in there. I will do my best to parse them apart, but feel free to come back at me and we'll take it from there, and other people can assist as necessary. I think the first thing I would say, and you've been around the program and have seen the program go through its ups, its downs, its starts, its stops, and deal with budget uncertainties when we've had budget uncertainties. I think we're in really good shape right now. You know, I think we've come a long way in the last 18 months. We're on very solid footing with our budget this year. We have about 500, probably a little more than 500, I don't have the numbers in front of me, FTE associated with the program throughout the agency, working on all the components of 2020. And I think we're really moving from that research phase into that implementation phase, into that build phase, and that's what's really critical for us. It has been challenging over the last couple years for the teams to do all of the work that they need to do, knowing the magnitude of work that's yet to come. But they did it, and they did a monumental job in making that happen. They pulled off a 13 test at the same time they were planning a 14 test. They pulled off a 14 test at the same time they were planning a 15 test, or 4 15 tests to happen in 15. And we're in the process now of implementing and executing those 15 tests at the same time that we're planning our 16 tests and our 2020 design. So in terms of the team coming together, this is the critical point, and it's the right point in time. You know, it's a different skill set to, in some ways, to plan and to execute and to implement. And so we're making that transition and putting the right people in the right place. We're staffing up the branches, bringing staff from all over the Census Bureau that haven't had an opportunity to work on things in our IT directorate or in our communications directorate or in our economic directorate, and having them bring those skills to bear within the 2020 program. And I think it's coming together nicely. I don't know if I hit everything you were looking for. Feel free.
So the research has been basically done, the 2012 to 2014, is that correct? Or?
Well, I wouldn't say that the research is done. I think we've completed some aspects of research, and we certainly still have more to do. We're in the address validation test now. We have 3 additional tests planned for 15. But in terms of thinking about the census design, we have a good handle on what that high-level design will look like. It's pretty clear that we focused our early research efforts around the 4 innovation areas related to address canvassing, field re-engineering, utilizing administrative records, and optimizing self-response. What our staff and what our teams need to do now is to take that high-level design and flesh that out a level lower so that we understand the interaction effects of all of these components, and we can bring it to life, and we can make it real, and we can execute it. With each of that, there's a myriad of decisions that need to be made, and some of those decisions require additional research and testing. Some of those decisions we know. The beauty about bringing back some of our folks with institutional knowledge is they bring back the strengths and that experience. But not everyone at the table has that institutional knowledge, and that's good too, because that's how we have new ideas and innovation and can continue to push the program forward. This census is going to be like no other census that we've done. It's the census of the 21st century. We're using technology in ways that we should have been doing. We're using technology in new ways. That changes how we think about things. Bob Colosi's over on the side, and I don't think he's speaking today, but I'm sure at an upcoming PMR he will be, about quality control. That's one of the areas that Bob and I have had so many conversations. Our typical approach, and you all know this, to quality control has been, let's do a re-interview. Let's get out there, let's do a re-interview. And that's what we've done. But we have technology now that can help us. We have Paradata that tell us information, that tell us if we have an interviewer sitting at McDonald's filling out their form. Maybe not McDonald's, maybe it's Panera, I don't know, Starbucks, who knows. But telling us if they're sitting in one place when they should be at this place way over here, that give us those indications. We saw that through CIMAX. We saw what technology will help us do. This is a very, very different census, and it's exciting for us. Other questions? Ben?
I was just wondering what the process is to determine what decisions can be made this year, and then which ones are sort of still outstanding even at the design decision point, which is kind of an artificial point, and we're acknowledging that there are still outstanding questions. So what kinds of things are we okay with not deciding this year? How do we figure that out?
Again, we will focus heavily this year on the 4 key design areas. In addition, we'll focus on the programs that have an early implementation. For example, the redistricting data program kicks off in 2016, the local update of census addresses in 2017. We can wait a little while for the operations traditionally known as update, enumerate, update, leave. You'll see in the operational plan that we're focusing, and the most narrative, the most content will be associated with the earlier operations. And then we'll build the operational plan as we approach the others. But eventually, all 34 of those operations will be included.
Tricia Durr again. This has to do with the systems, and the LUCA program has a major bullet there about building the systems. And of course, NERFU and address canvassing, so much is relying on systems coming together. And okay, as Tricia, not as the OIG, I'm just going to say that the systems did operate in the 2014 test, and I was shocked, well, not shocked, but, you know, the politically correct word equivalent. Anyway, my point is that the enterprise system lifecycle development, right? And that's basically using agile approach. And there's just like this enormous number of requirements that are coming out of these functional areas. I guess this is an observation, but it just seems like there should be some big central repository of these requirements so that people can be constantly understanding them and consolidating them and so on, breaking down the interfaces and making sure everybody's talking to one another, both within the computers and within the requirements level. So I'd just like to hear a few words regarding that.
So let me start with one thing, and I think Deirdre may want to say something, and I don't know if Brian does or not, but we'll play it by ear. I think you're spot on. I mean, the integration of our systems is something that we're well aware of. What we've been doing as we did our 13 test, as we did our 14 test, even as our 15 test, is we've been using prototype proof of concept systems or one-off systems from what we had from the 2010 census as we move forward, starting to roll in the components of our new systems moving down the road. But that integration and how they come together isn't something we're not thinking about. In fact, it's something we're actively thinking about. What you'll see in the 15 test, actually, as we start to integrate Mojo, our new enhanced operational control system, is we're beginning that integration even while in proof of concept phase. But to that end, I also wanted to share something that you may or may not have seen, which is another reflection, I think, of our awareness of that point that you just raised, is that earlier this week it was announced that Stephanie Studs is actually going to be leading a new effort for us within the Census Bureau. And she's going to be the head of an office called the Office of Innovation and Implementation. And around that effort, we're super excited about this, right? Around that effort is that very notion. It's that notion of how do we bring all of this together and ensure that it's integrated in such a way that the systems meet the business needs. And Stephanie, through the work that she's been doing with Rocket for us, developing Mojo, the enhanced operational control system, as well as the work that she's led in the economic directorate on both economic systems and on enterprise systems such as COMET or ICAID, brings that expertise for us and really will help us move that forward. So when you talk about sort of that central repository, I think this is a reflection of the fact that we see that same need. Come on, any other questions? We left lots of time. Dan, thank you.
Hi, Dan Cork, National Academies, National Research Council. I have a small slew of questions. First set for Andrea, and I apologize, this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but if there's a hint of weeds, someone's got to dive into them. When you're talking about GUPS, the partnership software, on the first mention of it, it sounded like it was something that might already be in use. Later on, it sounded like something completely de novo, and I'm just trying to figure out where in the maturity cycle
yeah,
it is.
Okay, so, and you're going to ask them one by
There's-
one, so I
yeah.
appreciate that, Dan. So the GUPS is in development right now. So we had requests for, like an RFP out for GUPS in the summer, and it's been awarded. And we are in the process of, developing user stories and defining requirements for all of the components of GUPS. GUPS will start off and be first used by our block boundary suggestion program. And that, we will begin testing with some of those participants later in this year,
Okay.
so that it can be used in 2016. The idea with GUPS is going to be a little bit different from MTPS, which was the predecessor to that we used last decade. GUPS has been, I can't say it's been built yet, but the concept behind GUPS is that we'll have core modules that will be used by all the programs, as opposed to last time around, I believe we had a, kind of release for each particular geographic partnership program. So in a sense, we are developing some of the LUCA functionality, especially related to, seeing a map and being able to update features, because those core functionalities would be used in other geographic programs, like block boundary suggestion program. So does that kind of
And
get
that
at where
also,
you're
yeah,
going?
yeah. That's a good segue to where I was going, thinking of, would that also be eventually used in BAS or other sort
Yeah,
of things?
yeah, it's going to be used in everything,
Okay.
I can list them all, or I
No,
can
no,
say,
no,
yeah,
that's
BAS,
fine, that's fine.
BBSP, the statistical programs, LUCA, all the major geographic programs throughout
So
the
you'd make-
2020 cycle.
Yes, you made reference to doing BAS first time all digital. Is that using prototype of what might be, or holdover of the,
It's a holdover, and in
TPS.
fact, we really wish the new software were available, but it's not. We're using the MTPS software right now, or also accepting digital submissions like we had when not through it, but in lieu of using that software. So
Okay.
that decision was made largely because we wanted to explore how we could save some money, and doing a all digital BAS helped us, sustain a budget cut that we had, and it also helps us examine how many people are interested in doing digital BAS. So far, so good. We've actually had really good response rates already. Invitation materials went out in December, and already, we did an email blast with our new system, and we've already had quite a few people respond. So it's going well so far, but we're going to monitor the sort of conversations that get started as a result of, are we marginalizing the paper participants?
I'm going to come back to GUPS in a second, but since you're on the point of the BAS experience, there was also a line in there about looking at the feasibility of web-based registration for LUCA. How much does the all-digital BAS pave the way for some of that? How much is the feasibility of web-based registration tied to the swearing, the certifying of the particular local liaisons? How much of it is tied to the demonstrating the capability for just basic upload of geographic files in the right way?
Yeah, you're asking an excellent question, and that is one of the research questions essentially that we're going to be asking in that 26 timeframe to figure this out. We're looking at digital digital sign up for all the geographic partnership programs through the GUPS. So that's probably the better example for where we're going to start getting the experience. But as you mentioned, and as I mentioned, it's more complex when we're talking about the, signing the paper to say, I'm not going to put these materials on our share drive at work, or, the security requirements that for LUCA are a little more arduous in a sense, so.
Certifying that is the
So,
bigger
yeah,
concern.
so
Okay.
we're looking at it. We don't know if that's going to work out, but that's something that we'd like to do.
Okay, and then back to GUPS proper. And in line of also one of the future work things, is just an interesting word choice of it being, looking at the requirements for participants as opposed to by participants. Make it sound like requirements for structuring the input you're going to get as opposed to what the people might need, what might incentivize them to supply, to participate in LUCA as they might otherwise not. You mentioned developing user stories, and I'm just curious, based on the notion of thinking of requirements for GUPS as an enabling thing for LUCA, what sort of thoughts you might have had about getting user stakeholder input, getting past participants or non-participants?
Okay, so I'm going to try to answer this to the best of my ability, and if I don't, you're just going to let me know. So GUPS is a piece of software, and right now we're trying to get requirements for how that software will help satisfy the needs for the geographic programs, in terms of the, like, you know, how to add a line and how to make a modification to an area, or how to submit an address change. Okay, so those are sort of more technical and functional requirements of the actual software. But
The
I think,
requirements for populating censuses, databases.
well, and actually for developing the software itself. Now, within the GUPS plan, there is plans to engage stakeholder participants in our testing, so to make sure that, you know, they're understanding it. But I think maybe where you're going is, hey, how are we going to engage our partners into thinking about taking the leap to do digital? And I think that's where we got a lot of good feedback from the focus groups that we did over the past year. And so I mentioned that report where we have 12 recommendations. Several of those surround folks wanting different types of data formats. For instance, like last time around, we just had an ASCII data format. This time around, some of the participants suggested that they would like to see us put some of the data in like a shapefile format, because that would be easier for them to consume. So I think we have already kind of completed that through those focus groups to engage folks in how they want to play with LUCA. So I think, so does that answer your question? So the program requirements we're defining through that. The functional requirements for the software, you know, are a little bit different, so.
Some of us do await LUCA with bated breath. Any chance I get. Backing up just a little bit, running through the structure for the basic high-level stuff for the ConOps. Question came to mind, there was a line in there about list of operational research in FY16 and 18, and it just made me wonder what the ties are between the folks developing the ConOps document and the people who are currently working on the 15 test, will be working on the 16 test, might even be detailed to be thinking about 17 and later or whatnot. Just ties between how much the document is driving the testing, how much the testing is driving the document, or both.
So that's a great question, and it was one of the questions we asked ourselves as we were putting the team together. We needed to ensure that we had those linkages. So when we put together the core team, and another factor related to putting together that core team is we recognized that we have over 500 people right now working on the 2020 program, and we can't put over 500 people on the team responsible for synthesizing all of this information. But it is why there are 3 people from the decennial programs that are actively represented on that. There's actually more than 3, right? If we're looking at the 15 test, for example, Marianne Chapin is on that core team. Marianne is also instrumental now in the planning for the non-response follow-up component of the census test in Maricopa. Evan is on the core team. Evan is instrumental in the address validation test that we have going on now, as well as our plans for the 16 test. Andrea Brinson, who will be, she's clearly instrumental now, but in her new role as the deputy chief of our decennial census management division, is instrumental across all the boards in ensuring that integration. It was something that we really thought long and hard about. Peter Miller, of course, who is critical to our work in adaptive design and our work in bringing forward the efforts of adaptive design and the initial use of administrative records from the 13 tests that we did in Philadelphia is our key methodologist on the team. And it's what we really thought about and worked hard to ensure that we had the right representation so that information flow would go both ways. Ooh, sorry, as I hit the mic, would go both ways and would continue. It's also why Ann and her team update the program leads, which the program leads meeting, team leads meeting, is a meeting that happens every 2 weeks, I think. And it includes the team leads from all of the teams involved in the 2020 program. So that active communication is being fed both ways.
Okay.
Did you want to add anything?
I think I'd just like to say, and today was a very good example, that we recognize the importance of contingency planning. So my goal is to ensure that we have backups for everything. And really, how do we funnel the knowledge base down? Many of us have worked on the census for 20 years. We have great people in the ranks that we need to work with, strengthen, build their skill set, and make them ready to stand up right behind us.
Just a couple of other things. In the list of the 34 proposed operations, that's tentative, all subject to change, I understand that, but just a couple of points that caught my eye. Under the infrastructure, there was a label for service center. Is that envisioned as sort of any help desk operation from what might be the local offices to the enumerators out in the field to whoever?
Yes.
Okay. And the field infrastructure piece, that also include the traditional NPC operations and adding in logistics tracking. Okay. I'll shut up. One last question. If I could back up to Lisa's presentation, I got in a little bit late, thanks to Gate 7. But on the top level organizational thing for the new management structure, one offshoot to the side was translation office. You might have mentioned a few words about what that was. I'm just curious.
Actually, I didn't talk about any of the centralized offices today,
Okay.
just in the essence of time, but I'm happy to. So within our directorate's reorganization, we have several centralized offices. Most of the centralized offices that we're proposing are just that. We're looking to pull functions from the divisions, and instead of replicating them across all of the divisions, we'll have a core staff that will help perform that across. The translation office is a little bit different. The translation office is something that actually will be housed within the decennial directorate, but it's an enterprise office. It came about as a result of one of our IOE, our Improving Operational Efficiency submissions, a couple of years ago, which was that the Census Bureau needs to have or should have a centralized translation office. Within this office, we're looking at having 3 components within the office. One will be some in-house translation staff, and we're actually working actively with HRD and with OPM right now because there is a series that the Census Bureau currently doesn't utilize for professional translators, and we're looking to bring that series in-house to staff that component of that office. And so that section within that office will have the core languages that we use most frequently. We'll then have a small section within that office dedicated to doing translation research so that we can stay abreast of what is current and we can ensure that we're up to date with the current standards. And then the third section, recognizing that the translation needs for the Census Bureau kind of grow and shrink depending on where we are during the decade, will be a core staff dedicated to maintaining a contract for us and then managing that contract vehicle. Jenny Kim actually will be on the agenda later today. She'll be talking about the 2015 National Content Test. She is the lead for us in developing the plans for the translation office. So if you have specific questions beyond what I've said,
That was the
she
basic
can talk
question.
about it.
It looked like an enterprise-wide thing, and it was just kind of, you're just curious to see it stuck there, but that's good. Thanks.
Ty.
Hi, Ty Mitchell, Government Accountability Office. Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to see you starting off the year with all this energy. One question and then just 2 general comments. And thank you, Dan, for breaking the glass on the weeds. I feel more comfortable diving in a little bit here. Actually, this one's not that weedy. heard reference to a couple of different sets of schedules being baselined, and no doubt there's many others, like the IT, that have their own schedules being baselined. In the context of the 2015 rollout, are we looking to see kind of the tier 3, tier 4 stuff baselined, all kind of integrated in the same time frame, getting all those together?
Our schedules are all baseline, Tier 1 through Tier 4. Next week we have a offsite of the Decennial Census Management Division, ADCs. And as soon as that offsite is to help us work toward our reorganization and the placement of the 13s. Lisa referenced that activity earlier. As soon as that's over, we're going to take a very close look at our schedules and figure out what needs to be updated in light of recent changes that have been made, in light of our research and testing through 13, 14, and 15. But we do have a dedicated set of schedules who are currently and consistently working with our staff to make sure the updates are in.
Okay, and thank you. The 3 to 4 tier, that's baseline beyond the 2015 decision?
So just to, I think, speak specifically to the question you might be asking, as of December 31st, we had baselined the 2015 testing schedule. We had completed the integration of that and had baselined it.
Okay. Just two general observations. One, I was just a little bit confused on what you meant by the census operational plan when I saw the communication tools being part of the plan, the tools on how to communicate the plan being part of just, but anyways, that's just a general observation. I'm not sure, because then I looked at the operational team, I didn't see the communications directed on there, right? But, so I'm just kind of trying to reconcile that a little bit. But you don't need to respond to that unless this isn't obvious. The second observation is, I heard a lot of talk already about the administrative records on the address side, and I know we're going to hear more on the NERFU side. And just as we're talking today or down the road, the touchstones that demonstrate how those different pieces are being worked on together. I know everybody's matrixing, but specifically when you're I'm making this up, but when you're modeling the change detection, for example, I can imagine that some of the information at the block level might be correlated with some of the propensities for whether a unit is vacant or not. So you're probably wrestling with challenges on both sides, stuff like that. And just to the extent that there's touchstones of where you're learning from each other and working together, in the absence of having the admin records research plan census-wide in place, it'd be great to hear some of that if there's some obvious ones when you're presenting. Thanks.
Just to quickly speak to, I think, the first point, which is about communications and why the communication tools were there. Actually, Jeannie and I have been, she's not here right now, but Jeannie and I have been talking actively, and we do have folks from the Communications Directorate as part of it. Why we indicated it as part of the operational plan is we recognize in this day and age the value and the utility in communicating through things like infographics and other communication tools that really aren't, for those of us that are statisticians, our strength in producing. We try, sometimes we understand them, sometimes we confuse you with them. So we really wanted to bring in core help in order to help us do that. That's also why the team name has changed from, I think, when we first talked about it, which was when we first chartered this team, we called it the ConOps team. And as we moved through the 6 weeks that we've been operating, we realized that it was more, there's a technical meaning behind the term ConOps, which that is one component of what we're producing. But the team itself is really producing more than just that ConOps piece. It really is that operational plan. Other questions?
Just a quick question about the term administrative records and its use in the geography arena versus non-response arena. Those are two things that may overlap to a degree, probably to a large degree, but not completely. So to the extent that that can start being differentiated, that would be great.
Thank you. We have a horrible weakness of referring to administrative records to mean administrative records and third-party data, and we do need to do a better job of delineating what we're speaking about when. Okay, if we don't have any other questions or comments, I think we are right on schedule for our break at 11 o'clock. So we're going to take about a 15-minute break and then come back. And when we come back, Stephanie Studs will talk with us about 2020 census field reengineering. Thank you.